On this episode of Intent Topics, we are joined by guest Justin Whitcomb. And today we'll be talking about how to use relationships to sell, even in a world that seems totally transactional.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Intent Topics. My name is Logan Kelly. Today I'm with a special guest, Justin Whitcomb. Justin, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, man, I'm stoked to be here. This is really looking forward to it. Big fan of the podcast.
Cool, dude. Well, we appreciate having you. So a little bit of background on, how I know you. We were together, you were on one side of the car business. I was on the other. And now we've grown up and we're not in the car business anymore. And we're on to bigger and better things, much bigger and much better things. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Maybe start by just kind of providing a little background that, so I would consider myself kind of a career salesperson. In the car business, I did exactly what you did, but, more when we started working together, I was doing automotive financing. And so really the way that you and I got to know each other was you were an account that I helped to secure loans for, right, for your customers. And what that really taught me is how much I love, being in sales and helping people solve problems and kind of just building those type of relationships. So fast forward to today, I decided to kind of pivot from pure cars into automotive technology. Did that for several years and then realized that I wanted to pivot out of automotive. So now I'm in cybersecurity sales and I work for a company that provides some sort of a security risk product for organizations of all shapes and sizes.
Nice. Yeah, so I think the reason that I'm excited to have you on the podcast is of all the people that I've worked with, you were the most sort of consistent at maintaining relationships with a whole host. Obviously I experienced it, myself, and then, with the other people in the industry. You were exceptional at really cultivating these relationships and building value long term with the people that you're working with, or I guess they were your prospects. And it's interesting in this day and age, everything is so transactional, everything is so metrics driven. I think some of the people coming up right now don't have the concept of what transcends the numbers, like what is actually being that salesperson mean from a relationship building standpoint, from a creating content or creating relationships and supporting those with different pieces of content, whether that be a phone call or an email, something that's going to help. And you don't always get I know, especially you calling into my account, you didn't necessarily get a return immediately off of that, but it was the little things all added up to a much greater thing. So I'm wondering how you've been sort of bringing that into you're in tech. It's quite transactional. It's quite, it's fast moving, et cetera. So how have you brought that importance of a relationship, or how are you leveraging that now?
Yeah. So, well, the first thing I would tell you is I think a lot of just understanding relationship, it's really more around like human psychology, right? And putting yourself in the buyer's shoes and saying, or, buyer or whoever you're engaging with, how would you want to be treated? And so I think there's like a natural level of empathy that you have to have in sales. I think it's also really important that you understand the end game, right? So you're able to realize that, you're going to have to do a lot of additional work in order to get the payoff that you want long term in the form of, sales. In the car business, it was contracts, funded loan contracts, and now it's SaaS products. And so, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head, right? Like I think SaaS is kind of broken up between, kind of this transactional model, which is what we see a lot of time, fast moving. You hear about like inbound marketing and people just raising their hand and saying, "Hey, I want this technology." But the reality is that once you buy that technology, you're going to make an investment with that company to try to improve your business processes using that technology. And that's where really, account management and relationship building really comes into play. And so in my world, unfortunately, I don't get to interact with customers once they buy. And so what I really noticed where my skill set has really flourished is, working with a channel distribution arm, right? So although I can't, directly work with all of these individual companies and build the relationships that I've had with you or, some of the other car dealerships that I used to work with. What I can do is build those kind of relationships with we call them VARs, right? Value added resellers or resellers.
Yep.
Because ultimately they're the ones that have the deep relationships and are the trusted advisors of the companies that I'm trying to sell into. So they're really that's really how I'm able to kind of engage on a relationship level, but partly, right? So, yeah.
Sure. So let's talk about that. We here at Union, we love the channel. I'd love to kind of understand. I think a lot of people, a lot of companies talk about the importance of the channel, and we've had some very, very, senior and sophisticated individuals on who have talked about building, channel programs and whatnot. What I'd like to understand is like, what does the day-to-day look like for, you're a high performer. So what does a high performer who's leveraging their channel, building those relationships and, sort of transcending that transactional nature that so many salespeople are, what does your day-to-day look like? Like, what do you feel makes that such an important piece of your game?
It's funny I have to kind of tell you this kind of running joke in our office. And that is, I think I take a different approach than a lot of the salespeople. So it's kind of a given that, I'm on a sales floor. There's a lot of guys around me. And the running joke is if Justin's on the phone, he's talking to a partner, right? As opposed to doing a demo or talking to a customer. So they kind of, that's just the joke, because I do spend a lot of time engaging and investing with that partner. It just doesn't start there, right? Like I would say the majority of the partners that I've really started to establish good rapport with, I'm doing things like I'm texting them regularly, right? I might give them a call in the morning to check in on an appointment that we had a couple of days ago, just to say, hey, have you heard any feedback on this? Outside of that, like I also just kind of check in periodically to see how they're doing, right? Because so in our world, we primarily deal with resellers that sell security products. And they provide a wealth of knowledge in terms of understanding what the market is doing, right? Like, so I'm a lot more effective calling into a CISO or a CIO if I understand what are the big trends that are going on, right? So I can speak to those, right? So right now in security, there's a huge push towards, privilege access management and identity access management. And, so if I can somehow figure out a way to have a conversation and involve my product around that, I know that at least I'm going to have a conversation that's more valuable. So I leverage the channel to give me kind of that almost like market intel, right? To understand what's going on in the market.
Sure. That's interesting. So there's a little bit of like, you're not necessarily always looking to extract revenue from your channel. There's other value. So, we talk a lot about mind share in the channel. And I feel like a lot of companies are building solutions, technology solutions and whatnot to try to cultivate that mind share among their VARs. But it sounds like there's an element of just doing the work. So what are some of the sort of value adds you think, you're obviously extracting value from your VAR network, whether that be a deal or that be, some good intel, but what are some of the things that you're providing those VARs that kind of allows you to then get
Yeah.
from them? What's your
Great
give?
point. And I'm glad you brought it up, because I think a lot of reps don't really get that, right? Like that, you kind of have to put yourself in their shoes and kind of ask the old question with them, what's in it for me, and think about how they would respond to that. And so what I would tell you is that I think you've got to understand that the channel, they make money. It's a distribution model, and it's based on a margin game. Right. And so they make money based on how much of your product they sell and how much you're willing to give them in terms of margin. And so there's a couple ways to go about doing that. Right. One is having them have the relationship directly with the customer. And, we call it deal reg, which is, I think, an industry term across. But one is that idea of deal regging. Right. So they're bringing you into a deal. This other idea is more, more of a fulfillment, right? Where you're using them to pass through paper because they already have the existing relationships and contracts in place with the vendor. And in some cases, you can actually bring them into accounts that they weren't previously talking to that. Maybe they had a stale, connection at that company because they weren't bringing them the right products or the right services. And so when you bring them into a deal and provide that kind of an opportunity, you sometimes can kind of get the pump primed again for them to start having conversations about other products. So I'll give you a great example. We were working with one of the larger resellers in nationwide, and it's very difficult for you talk about mind share. We're not a huge company. It's very difficult for us to be noticed when you think about $1 million firewall deals that are sold on a daily basis. And so one thing I did was, I was actively involved in one company, and I brought in one of these VARs that really doesn't focus a lot on what we do, and gave him a substantial amount of margin. Not only that, I provided him an in to be able to start having conversations with the CIO and the CISO, which he's been struggling with for years. So it's about opening some of those doors up that they weren't in. And it's also about providing, money, right? And money talks and everything else walks. And in some cases, if you're not giving them margin. And so, kind of interesting element I would tell you there is a lot of reps will bring in a partner to a deal and try to push it through with giving them just a few points. And I just think that's the wrong approach because number one, they're not making much money on the deal, right? And you're still asking them, even if it's minimal work, you're still asking them to exude their time and their resources and their energy. And they've got hundreds of other technology, their partners who are trying to get them to do the same thing. So you want them to think when their phone rings and you're on the other end, or it's a text message or whatever, you want them to see dollars. You want you to represent dollars to them, and that's how you build that relationship.
Sure. Interesting. So it's about allowing them, margin stacks. Now, so your stats are when you talk about this, like, are you getting good margins on the deals you're putting together? Or are you giving it all away? Like where's the kind of give and take end?
Well, so I can tell you that our company has made a huge investment in the channel, and as part of that, there's kind of a backlift to allow us to be able to provide more margin up front to that channel partner, and not lose all that money on within our own commission structure. And I don't foresee that lasting forever. But what it's doing is it's incentivizing us to establish and build those relationships. And so long term, the hope is that the majority of the business we receive is going to come through the reseller actually regging those deals. So, we're doing less of that upfront prospecting and outreach of sale, and really using that distribution. If you think about it, almost like they're my business development rep, right? They're the ones that are out in the field, and they're the ones that are selling value my product and finding out when it makes sense to bring it into them.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's like, this definitely is are you working harder, smarter, right? And it sounds like you're doing both, but the channel really is your force multiplier, right? You have a handful of people out there, bringing you into deals, as opposed to you just trying to hunt for those, onesie twosies, right? So what do you think what do you think your strategy is going into 2020? Do you think it's adding some, so are you looking for more partners? Are you looking to cultivate the ones you have, or do you think you're going to need to, in order to continue your trajectory, do you think you're going to need to find some deals from another place?
So the channel strategy for an organization is multifaceted. So, at a strategic level, you have, the executive interaction where, you talk about, our company as a whole talking to a channel company and trying to build, do marketing events together and things like that. Right. But in order for that strategy to work, you need that to flow downhill. Right. So you need the managers to talk amongst other managers. Yeah. And then at the rep level, you need a lot of like grassroots one-on-one, we call it account mapping, right? Like looking at what accounts do I work with that you already have a contact with, or what accounts have, do we both want to try to go after? So there's different, varying strategies there. I would say one thing that I'm really going to focus on is strategically going after several partners that we don't have as much interaction with, but also continuing to really build upon the momentum that I'm starting to get in the market from working with channel partners that we've been working with for a long time. So I don't think it really changes. I think what changes is the relationship you have with those partners. And so now what's interesting is, although the running joke is that, Justin spends way too much time in the channel, I can tell you on a daily basis, a rep comes up to me and says, "Hey, do you know so-and-so from this VAR?" And because, hey, I want to get into this account and they seem to, be aligned with it. And I'll say, and I'm happy to do it, right? I'll send a quick intro email and, I've got a trusted relationship with that person. And so they're more willing to then pick up the phone and talk to my rep, because I'm recommending that conversation.
Awesome. So you are figuring out how to just absolutely kill it with the channel, and the people in the channel love your phone calls because they see it. It's as dollars coming through.
You would think
right?
It's more complicated than that. And there's so many nuances to the channel, right? Certain people that are,
sure.
You have certain people that are more pro channel than others. You have certain people that have been, really burned by maybe, taking a deal through the channel and then having them stall the deal because they were trying to sell something additional or they had another project in play. But the reality is it's really kind of, it's the long-term approach, right? Like, it really is focusing on the long game and not the individual transactional sale, and realizing that, if you can establish that rapport and you can really build that presence, your job becomes a heck of a lot easier, because now you don't have to go out and do all the outbound prospecting and all the stuff that you hear, all these people who are bombarded constantly with phone calls and emails and stuff like that just are totally numb to.
Right. So for the company or the leader or the rep, that's looking at this and saying, how over the next 12 months do I really get more out of my channel relationships?
Block off time,
one action
every single day
that they could take every day. What is it?
To have conversations with your partners, to review accounts list. Make sure that, I think a good salesperson kind of has a cadence and they block off time for certain things, right? So I put time in the morning, every morning, for prospecting, and whether I get to use it for prospecting every morning, that's a different story. But my prospecting is, the channel. It's outbound cold calling. It's emailing. It's going, to events sometimes and reaching out to key contacts. But specifically, make sure that you continue to find time for the channel. Because if you don't find time for the channel, here's the thing: you probably have a competitor that is, and you probably also are losing an opportunity because it's probably an account that you're trying to get in front of that one of these channel partners is already talking to. You have to.
Right. So make time for the channel.
You have to.
That's gonna be the title. Make time for the channel. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Oh man, this is
cool, man. Well, anything else you'd like to lay down here?
You know, nothing ever happens the way it's supposed to, or the way you plan it out. You know, I mean, perfect example is look at you and I. We were two knuckleheads in the car business, right? We're crushing it now on the marketing side.
Absolutely.
I'm starting to find a little bit of a groove here selling SaaS and cybersecurity. But who knows where we're going to be at in 10 years. So I guess, you know, if there's anything I would say is, you know, take every opportunity as like as some level of learning, and you know, nothing's a mistake, right? Everything's just, it's part of the journey, and you learn a little bit, and it's been fun. This is a fun ride. And, you know, I'm super stoked for you guys and what you're doing over at,
absolutely,
you know, at your shop, and you know, and you know, I hope we stay connected and keep these conversations going.
Absolutely, man. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you, everybody, for joining in to Intent Topics today. My name is Logan Kelly. Please give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast application you use. We will talk to you next time. Thank you very much.